Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to this press conference. Prime Minister Stubb and High Representative Mogherini will first make brief remarks on their discussions. Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and warmly welcome. I think I'll be descending down to this room 3 times today. This is number 2. Always a pleasure to see Federica. We discussed Russia, we discussed Ukraine, we discussed the foreign and security policy strategy of the European Union, including a few other questions. Our take in Finland is very clear. It's very important that the common foreign security policy of the European Union stays unified. It's very important that in any foreign policy conflict the EU has a common line. And our take is also that this common line has held steadfast and well throughout the conflict in Ukraine, for instance, on the sanctions issue. We also talked about the situation on the ground in Ukraine at the moment, and albeit there have been some violations of the ceasefire agreement, things are moving in the right direction, and we need to keep up the diplomatic challenge and make channels and make sure that this line continues. These were the words I wanted to say just to kick off, and perhaps Frederic will say a few more and then we'll go to questions.
Yes, thank you very much for the welcome here, and it is always a pleasure to exchange views. We meet each other in the European Council in Brussels, but it's great to be in Helsinki and to work on this European unity, because I'm convinced that the best way of having unity is starting from listening to different positions, different concerns, different priorities, different views and analysis, and get to a common ground. Here I share completely the analysis of the fact that we need to keep this unity. This is always our strength, being it in our action on the East or in the rest of the world. And I'm confident on the fact that we are going to keep the European unity, not only on the crisis in Ukraine, not only when it comes to our relations with Russia, but also in our action globally. And that's why it's so important to find in Finland such a good audience and a good partner for developing a common strategy, a European strategy, because this is going to be our strength. I have to apologize because my time for the press conference here is limited. I have a telephone call with President Poroshenko at 12:30, so this is a news, I guess, but not so much because we talk quite often. Exactly on the issues that we just discussed with the Prime Minister, the situation on the ground, the implementation of the Minsk agreements, the ceasefire, and the measures that the European Union can take to facilitate and support this process. As Prime Minister has said, it's moving in the right direction. We have to make sure that we reinforce this process, we make it sustainable and sustained in time. So I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and now we open the floor for the questions. Please wait for the microphone and mention your name and the name of your media before asking. We start with Helsinki Sanomat.
Anna-Liina Kauhanen from Helsinki Sanomat. Mrs. Mogherini, there's quite a pressure to change and rethink the EU's Russian policy, and your own issue paper concerning that was criticized quite hardly to be too lame. How divided is the EU member states now concerning Russian policy, and why is why and what consequences there might be about that?
European Union is united, not only on Russia, not only on Ukraine, but also on other issues of foreign policy. We have different histories, we have different political ideas, not only among Europeans, but within member states. In every member state there is a debate on foreign policy with different views expressed in parliament, in governments. And this is a richness, this is the good side of democracy, and this is our core value. But when it comes to take decisions, we are always united, we've always been united, even in recent difficult times. We'd like to remind you that in the end of February, we've unanimously taken a decision with the foreign ministers and then endorsed by the European Council on new sets of names, and individuals and entities that we added to the list of sanctions unanimously. So yes, we have a plurality of points of view, and this is natural. This is even good because it brings richness to the debate. But when it comes to take decisions, we are always united. I know the paper was criticized. The paper was also very useful for an internal debate, as it was meant to be, an internal debate of the ministers on the overall relations, strategic relations, between the European Union and Russian Federation. This is a debate that I know can pose some difficult questions. Questions are never in themselves a negative thing. You can give good answers or bad answers, but the question in itself is not good or bad. And I'm convinced on the fact that we need to give answers to difficult questions, also when it comes to the EU-Russian relations. When you have a problem, you don't hide it, you face it.
May I add to that perhaps one could link two rather separate issues. Number one is sanctions, and I would argue that the European Union has been very unified on that particular issue, and it has actually strengthened European foreign and security policy. The second one is our strategy with Russia, and that is of course closely linked to the events unfolding right now in Ukraine, and closely also linked to the 6 frozen conflicts that we see in the region. Our analysis is that we're coming to the end of an era, and it is the end of the post-Cold War, and we need to reassess the situation. These two issues are linked to each other, because if Russia tries again to follow the path of international law, of international relations and the international community, then it would be much easier for us to re-establish our partnership with Russia. But right now things are not looking that good, unfortunately.
Greta Karvala, Iltalehti, welcome to Finland. Madam Mogherini, quite many Finns think, though, that EU is too weak towards Russia. Can you do anything else than sanctions or negotiations?
You know, I think for generational issues or dimension, Prime Minister and myself, I guess, share no nostalgia of the Cold War era, right?
No.
And every time that I'm asked, are we too soft? Should we do something different than sanctions, which means economic pressure, and political negotiations, there is a reference to military strength. I would say that all of us, not only in Europe, but also in other parts of the world, have always said, and in Ukraine, that there is no military way out of this conflict, for the way in which the conflict has started and evolved. And I think we have to stop thinking that, for instance, economic pressure is soft, because it can be very hard, and military action is hard, because military action can be ineffective, sometimes even counterproductive. Look at other crises around the world. So I think that we have to overcome this 1950s attitude of putting in different boxes our soft power and hard power as two completely different things, and realize that we have an whole set of instruments and tools that we have to use in an intelligent and smart way, and overcome this old Cold War approach that Europe is for the soft things and other organizations or entities or countries are the tough ones. What has made a real difference has been if this positive trend has maybe started and hope it can be consolidated. Exactly the mix of economic pressures and of political negotiations. So if we have some positive developments today, it's thanks to this mix that we have put in place. Soft or hard, the limited results we have now is thanks to that mix.
Probably in this conflict there will be one virtue above all other virtues, and that virtue is patience.
I think we have time for one final question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Rail News, Wiley, Finnish broadcasting company. Concerning Ukraine, it's good that the active dialogue is going on with President Poroshenko. What comes to the Minsk process and the ceasefire, are these OSCE monitors enough to guarantee that, or should we think about sending peacekeepers to the point?
This is one of the things we'll discuss obviously with President Poroshenko. We are discussing among us. I've discussed this with the Secretary General of the United Nations because one of the suggestions or the ideas was to have a peacekeeping mission of the UN. My answer to that would be that what we have to do now, as we refer to the full implementation of all points of the Minsk Agreement, is to stick to that. And in the Minsk Agreement, it's the OSCE indicated as the organization in charge of the monitoring. So I would stick to that the OSCE is doing the monitoring, but at the same time, you're perfectly right in pointing out the fact that we need to increase the number of monitors, we need to increase their capacity to have access to the relevant areas and to the relevant informations. The European Union is already providing the OSCE mission satellite imageries and analysis of the situation on the ground so that they can have more instruments of monitoring. And we will discuss tomorrow in Riga in the informal meeting of the foreign ministers of the European Union together with the Secretary General of the OSCE of concrete measures of the European Union to support concretely the OSCE mission so that it can be more effective in the future. We have to do more to make it more effective, but we have to stick to that role.
If I may jump in, and from my experience in the war in Georgia in 2008, you always have three avenues that you can pursue when it comes to observation or when it comes to crisis management. Number one is the UN, which can either use its troops or its mandate, and right now it would be highly unlikely to get a mandate from the UN Security Council to have a crisis management operation in East Ukraine. Number two is the European Union, but we can only act, or NATO for that matter, or we can only act on the basis of a UN mandate, and since that is unlikely, I would not see that avenue being pursued. And the third one we then have is OSCE monitoring. And I think that is the part that we need to strengthen. And it's also my experience that Russia allows OSCE monitoring when it feels that the situation has stabilized. So that's a path that we shall pursue.
Unfortunately, we have to close the press conference because of the timetable. Thank you, Prime Minister Drake. Thank you, High Representative. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.
All right. Up and out.